Thank you. It's great to see you here in such huge numbers. But I understand you've had quite a long session before. Just a question. Was anybody here, did any of you attend my session last Tuesday? Okay, a few. It might seem as if I'm giving the same presentation again. I'm not. It starts off in the same way, but it goes in a different direction. On Tuesday, I was presenting mostly to freelance translators, and the idea was today to give the same message, but geared towards agencies, LSPs, and other people involved in the profession. I don't know if there are any of those here. Doesn't matter. Don't worry if you think it's the same thing. If you are genuinely bored, then my wife is giving a painting workshop just across there. So feel free to just go quietly, but don't take everyone else with you. Thank you. So that's me. This is me. I'm from the Netherlands, although originally I was born and educated in Britain, so I regard English as my first language and Dutch as my second language. Okay, introduce myself. And that is the limit of my Russian, that is the limit of my Ukrainian language. So it's up to the interpreters. The interpreter, are you there, Eugenie? Yevgeny, yeah. He was on our trip yesterday on our tour to Kortis something island. He was my private personal interpreter, which is a very great privilege. And we were talking about the art of interpreting, which is something that scares me stiff because I cannot do it. And he was at my session on Tuesday just observing, and I said, how was it? You know, how was I? He said, very diplomatically, I thought, you were good, but you're difficult. Now, people have been saying that to me for as long as I can remember. Good, but difficult. I take that as a compliment. So he's there at the back there, and I'm going to be good and difficult today. I find interpreting amazing. I don't know about here, but in most of the world, most people don't know the difference between a translator and an interpreter. They think, more or less the same job. I have a very simple way of remembering the difference between a translator and an interpreter. An interpreter is somebody who wears proper clothes, who does not walk around in pajamas with cups of coffee endlessly. So that's all you need to remember. The rest, it's the same. So I've introduced myself. This is me, and this is also me. I am here with two purposes today, or this week in fact. I always have my two hats with me. I don't know if it works in Russian or in Ukrainian. There's an English phrase saying wearing two hats or wearing different hats, meaning you can be doing one thing at one time and something else at the other time. The idea is not to wear both hats together because that complicates things. So I have a translator's hat and I have an agency hat because I am basically first and foremost a translator. That's what I started doing and that's what I still do. In between, I became an agency, although I prefer to call it a translation company because, again, in some parts of the world, the word agency is like saying I'm a vampire. People have an attitude that you are a person that, not to be talked about, like in Harry Potter, where you don't mention the name. As I say, I don't know how many of you are agencies, LSPs, or other people involved in the outsourcing of work. Your experience might be different to mine in that you might find that reputation that we, that's we with this hat, have is not the same in this country, but it is in many. So here I am, a translator and a company, and as I was saying on Tuesday, I can combine those two roles quite easily. Please come in. You've missed absolutely nothing, right? So the title, the theme is how translators can look at their clients from a different perspective, translators and clients, and why translation companies, that's probably you, need to come up with a creative approach to translation. And that's not something that I wrote myself, that's the description that UTICamp put on their website about me. I gave them some information and they converted it into that. As you can see, I thought it was so well written, I've kept it as part of my title of my 2 talks this week. Today, I'm going to talk more about the second part, why translation companies can come up with a creative approach. If you're not an agency, if you are a freelancer, I would like your input later on as to, is this your experience? And if you are a translation company, or if you outsource work from time to time, I'd like your responses. Is that how you do it? Because we're in a global profession. We all do more or less the same thing, but in many different ways. The 3 misconceptions I mentioned last Tuesday. By misconceptions, I mean things that we sometimes misunderstand, things we assume we know, or we say things, but they may not be true. And the first one of those is that all translation agencies are bad. And I hear this from so many freelance translators. And of course, the second one, as you know, is that all translators are good. I also hear that from many freelance translators. And the third one is about machine translation being the end of our profession. It's not, it need not be. It's here to stay. We have to work with it or work around it. There is no danger if you're good. And if you're not good, then you shouldn't be here in the first place. Of course, yeah. Some translation agencies are bad. If you are a translation agency and you're here today, you're not in that category because you would not be here. The bad ones stay away in case they meet some of the translators that they pay peanuts to. So they won't be here, so I'm quite confident that anyone I'm speaking to today is not going to come afterwards and beat me up for saying things like that. But of course, most translators are good, because if we weren't good, we would not have work, and we would come to the conclusion it's not a job for us. Or we might become an agency, and yeah, anyway. And somebody quoted, I'm quoting, I can't remember who it was, said this, that it'll only be a threat to people who translate like machines. And I think that's a very important thing, because it's no good pretending that it doesn't exist. More and more things will be translated mechanically, if you like, and there will still be plenty of work for the translators and the translation agencies who specialize in the human aspect of translation. Okay, how can translators build up a good working relationship with translation agencies? And just as importantly, how can it happen the other way round? Now, I'm not here to give you any a checklist of things that if you do this, you'll be successful, or if you do that, you won't be successful. These are things that have worked for me as a translator, that's this hat, and for me as an agency with this hat. I have to say that now I'm not quite as young as I used to be, and I am now doing mostly just translation and leaving the administration to a couple of my colleagues, but I'll come back to that later. That's why I can be here now enjoying this amazing camp and not stuck back in the office running my company, which I still own. My advice to translators was, this was my first presentation, as a language service provider, right? So not as a translator, because as a translator, I cannot advise other translators on how they should be doing. That's just big-headedness. Big-headedness. Come on, interpreter, find a word for that. Okay. But so as a language service provider, I can, because that's partly my job. We use other translators, and we have to give them advice on how to do their work. So my advice is, be honest about yourself. Or my advice was last Tuesday, be honest about yourself. Don't invent things. Explain the sort of translation you offer, which sounds obvious, but often isn't, because translators who come to us often forget to tell us what sort of translation they do, and sometimes they forget on purpose, because the sort of translation they do is not the sort of translation that we are looking for. My agency is a creative translation company. We don't need technical, medical, or legal translators. And sometimes a technical translator will say, oh, I can be so creative you would not believe it. And I don't believe it. Promote your qualifications, but don't invent them. In some countries, you have a stack of paper, certificates as high as you can read, all saying what a wonderful person you are, and they're important, but they're not the only answer. I was at a very good presentation earlier today by Claire, somebody, and someone there in the questions and answers said that in this country, qualifications from, it was you, I think, wasn't it? Yes, sorry. Qualifications don't mean everything. Well, they don't mean everything anywhere. I'm based in the Netherlands, and we have very good universities with good schools of translation studies. But the piece of paper you get at the end is not the guarantee of a job. And the biggest criticism, I think, about the universities is that they train you very well to be a translator or an interpreter. They give you all the skills that you need. Then after 3 or 4 years, they kick you out into the big world outside and say, congratulations, go and find some clients. Imagine if we did that in other professions. You take a medical degree, you get a medical qualification, and they say, congratulations, Dr. Smith. Now go and find some sick people who need healing. But we do it in our profession. So qualifications are important, but they're not the end of the world. They're not the only answer. Yeah, give yourself enough time to do the job. What is enough time? I know, because of the system we use, that some people hand in translations at 3 o'clock in the morning, because it shows it on the thing. I wouldn't do that, but if that means they started at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and worked for 12 hours, I think that's too much time. If they started at 2:45 in the morning and finished at 3 o'clock, that's too little time, and they were probably tired and probably drunk at the same time, so not a good thing. Give yourself the amount of time that you need, even if it's something where you're being paid by time, you need the right amount. There's this word no that scares a lot of translators. I don't know if that's been your experience, you language service providers, that people think they have to say yes to everything. If someone declines a job that we offer them, we don't get angry. Actually, we're quite relieved, because if they decline that job, it means they think they're not suitable for that job. And if they think they're not suitable for that job, probably they are not suitable for that job. We respect them. And respect is another word I heard spoken earlier today across in the forest. The word respect. It's good to hear that in our profession, because so often you hear the word disrespect or lack of respect. Yeah, and then this thing about prices and rates and how much you get paid. Every conference I've ever been to, and I've been to lots of them, it usually is the biggest complaint by freelance translators that people say, can you lower your price? Can we do it cheaper? The answer is yes, of course you can. I quoted, I think on Tuesday, I quoted something I've seen on a Facebook group. It was a painting of the Mona Lisa, the original one, and next to it, the same painting done by an 8-year-old child, a bit like going on over there. And the caption was, of course, we can do it cheaper. You can, but then you have to be satisfied with the quality you get for that cheap price. Okay, again, assuming I'm speaking to LSPs, agencies, companies, it works both ways. If you expect your translators to be honest about themselves, you have to be honest about yourself. And that's not always so easy. Honesty does pay, at least in my opinion, honesty pays, because if you don't use it, they will find out. Your name will go around the dark web of the translation industry, and that you'll be found out eventually. Questions, I don't want any answers, I don't want a show of hands, so this is just hypothetical questions. Do you treat your, this is agencies, do you treat your translators as you would your members of staff, right? Or as an external service you can buy in, and if and when it suits you. Now, of course, if you're outsourcing to freelancers, you do buy in their services. You might be an agency with quite a big team of administrators, project managers, salespeople, and they are probably on your staff because they work with you all the time. But the translators you use are more likely nowadays to be freelancers. I don't know many agencies who have in-house people. In fact, I don't know if there are any agencies that have in-house translators. If there are, please tell me. 20 years ago, that would have been the case. 20 years ago, in the countries I have more contact with, large companies, banks, insurance companies, governmental departments, embassies, consulates had a pool of translators. The city near where I live in the Netherlands, the city of Eindhoven, is where the Philips electrical company started and still has its main headquarters. You know, they do everything from light bulbs to other light bulbs. 20 years ago, they'd have a team of 40 translators in-house, and when work came in, it went to them. They have one person now, and that one person actually is not a translator, he's an outsourcer. The rest, they got rid of. Of course, they have to pay more to outsource it, but it means these 40 people are not sitting around a big table drinking coffee, just waiting for work to come in their language. So that, I think, is the case, certainly in Western Europe. If it's different in other parts of the world, please tell me, but I don't think it is. Another question, do you always choose the translator who offers the lowest rate, or the fastest deadline, or even possibly both? Again, I'm not looking for hands up, but if you do, then you will get what you deserve. How do you react if a translator tells you he or she cannot complete the job already assigned to him or her? Here are 3 possible answers. We appreciate your honesty. We'll ask somebody more qualified. Right? So you say, I can't do that job because it's all about washing machines, and I translate about symphony orchestras. And you say that, and they say, fine. Or they might say, we can't force you to do it, but don't expect any more work from us. In other words, okay, you got away with it this time, goodbye. Just do it anyway, the client will never notice. Now, this happens. This happens. It doesn't happen with my agency, it doesn't happen with yours, and I hope for those freelancers here, it doesn't happen with the agencies you work for, but it happens in that dark part of our profession we try not to talk about. So, are you familiar with this? Yes, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. By that, Mr. James Goldsmith said that quality comes at a price. Of course, you can cut down on the costs, but if you cut down on the costs, you nearly always cut down on quality. We do a lot of work in my company, a lot of work in the travel and tourism sector. So we have a lot of contact with hotels. and holiday parks, but especially hotels. And they tell me that especially group organisers, not so much individual guests, group organisers say, we've got a group of 50 people coming to your hotel for 5 nights. Very good. What's the price? And you quote a price for the room, a bit like, people quote a price for a job. And the tour company says, no, sorry, too much. Can you make it cheaper? Now, if the hotel is going to be empty without that group, they'll say yes. Hopefully they'll say no. But they tell me, the hotel managers and the hotel owners, if they lower the price, what can they save money on? And the answer is the meals. You can't, if you take away the shower cap or the little thing of shampoo, that's not going to save you any money. But if you make the meal slightly smaller, inferior ingredients or less choice, that's the only way you can save money. So are you doing a service to those people on that bus tour who are coming along for a good holiday? Not really, because for an extra 2 or 3%, they would get the quality that they're looking for and the quality they deserve. So it's not just in the translation profession, it's in most professions. If you cut the price, then somebody suffers. We know the supermarket policy of forcing suppliers to give, well, I'm assuming it's the same here, I don't know, any country I've ever been to, you see these special offers, buy 3, pay for 2, or buy 1, get 1 free, or special offer this week. And they do that by forcing the suppliers to cut their prices. And if the suppliers don't do that, they don't use them. That's a technique that supermarkets use. As far as I'm concerned, translation is not a supermarket of words. We should not take the same attitude. Now, with this hat, a word about myself, a word about me, a word about what I do. I started off, well, translation is my second career, actually. I've had many careers, but my original career was in international education. I taught at an international school in the Netherlands, and I did it for as long as I really loved it, and I did. And then I stopped. I stopped while I was still enjoying it. I was young enough then to start something else and have a second life. And in a way, working in an international school is not completely different to translation, in that you're talking about things that you don't know anything about to children that can't understand it. In a way, translation is a bit like that, except with translation and with teaching, you've got to find out what it is you don't know before you start teaching it or translating it. So then I diversified, if you like, into, I retrained and became a translator. It was, for me, I thought, well, I'm not sure if it's the sort of thing I want to do. Give it a try. And I gave it a try, and it worked. This is our company headquarters now. Joke. Tower of Babel, that's not what we are, but that's not what we want to become. I started in 2004. I started my company in 2004, just me. Me, one client, one language, one hat. And that was, as far as I was concerned, that's what I was going to do. That's how it was going to continue until I got my pension from the state and I could throw both hats away and enjoy life, which still hasn't happened. Well, enjoying life has happened, throwing the hats away hasn't happened. But it sort of grew very quickly, as I was explaining last Tuesday. My first client, very happy with what I did, said, good translation. We want it in French, can you do it? No, I don't translate into French. And that's what I meant earlier about saying, say what you can do and what you can't do. I can translate into English from Dutch. I can't translate into French from anything. I can speak reasonable French, but not at that level. But I knew somebody who could do it. And that somebody did it, and that's how it happened. So after a few years, it had got to 7 languages, and I thought, it can't get any bigger than that. I don't want it to get any bigger than that, because if it does, I shan't be a translator anymore. I should just be an administrator. But things did not go as I intended. And that happened. And so 7 years ago, we were up to 20, I think it's 24 languages, and those are the languages we offered then. And in fact, it's now at that since 2015. Again, I can see people scouring the screen looking for the Ukrainian flag, and it's not there, but sorry. The reason I added those languages was for one reason only. The clients asked for it. Every language there has been asked for by one of our existing clients. The idea is not to offer every language in the world, but if I didn't offer a language when a client asked for it, the danger is they go somewhere else. They go to any of you who are language service providers, or they go to somebody else they find on internet. So it wasn't world domination that I was looking for. It was trying to keep existing clients happy. And we keep them happy now by offering 32 different languages. But there are 6,500 languages in the world, I have found out approximately. So 32 is not a huge amount of languages to offer. And more importantly, those are the only ones that actually make us any money. Those are, for my company, the profitable languages, and the rest, a service to our clients, or a bribe to our clients, or just simply so that they stay with us for the ones that we do make money out of, and they don't go to somebody else for the rest. My big philosophy, I suppose you could say, is the concept of fair trade translation, which sounds quite strange, because we think of fair trade as being something that has some connections with coffee or any bananas. Yeah, that's where we see the term fair trade. We don't normally see it applied to translation. I'll explain what I mean by fair trade. A trading partnership based on dialogue, transparency, and respect that seeks greater equality in international trade. That is not what I dreamt up myself. That is actually the World Fair Trade Organization's policy statement, mission statement, if you like. And I've highlighted those words: partnership, dialogue, transparency, respect, and equality, because I think those apply just as much to translation as they do to bananas. So if we're talking about fair trade, let's first of all talk about unfair trade and what we think about what unfair trade really means. I think most of us here would accept the fact that using child labour is unfair. It's dangerous, it happens. But how many of you bought a t-shirt for the equivalent of €5, wore it a couple of times and threw it away? Unfortunately, you're encouraging this sort of thing, because that t-shirt was probably made by some 8-year-old child in Cambodia who was working for nothing. I don't think child labour applies to our profession, although possibly it could in a rather strange and unusual way. I told you already I used to be a teacher in international education, teaching quite young children. And sometimes at parents' evening or parents' meetings, the parent would come along with the child, simply because the parent could not speak English. We were teaching in English because it was an international school. So they bring along the child as an interpreter. And I would speak to the parent, and the child would interpret to his or her mother or father what I said. I thought, that's great. That's child participation. What's wrong with that? I now realize years later I was completely stupid, because that child could have said anything he or she wanted to. I could say, little Johnny doesn't work very hard, and he says to his mum, Mr. Saych says, I work really well. And I'd have no way of checking. There's no post-editing on that. So, yeah, we do use child labour to a certain extent. Poor or dangerous working conditions should not apply to our profession, and we generally assume they don't apply to our profession, although you look at the conditions some translators work in at home, ashtrays full of cigarette butts, a whole spaghetti of wires on the floor that you could easily break your neck on if you tripped over them. So dangerous working conditions are another thing, but that's the fault of the translator himself or herself, because if they're working under those conditions, they've decided to. And unacceptably low wages, and that does apply to our profession, sadly. We know there are organizations, that's a polite way of saying crooks, who target mostly younger translators, often inexperienced translators, but usually good ones, and they bribe them with promises of gold-plated things when, in fact, they're paying peanuts. And as we know, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. That exists. I know because other translators have told me. You could say in any profession, you start off at a low wage, and if you're good, your salary increases. But most professions, you've got a job, you're employed by somebody, and there's some sort of commitment between the two. In our profession, there are enough people in the world prepared to work for a couple of cents per word that encourage the rogue agencies to continue that practice. And I think it's a scandal, but I cannot do anything about it. We can do something about it as a profession. So going back to my first quote, how can we be fair to our clients, translators, and ourselves and still run a profitable business? I do run a profitable business. I like to think we are fair to those categories. I hope so. There's nobody here who translates for me, so there's no one who's going to heckle me and say, no, you're a crook yourself. Okay. So, being fair to our clients and you being fair to your clients. This is something that every time I mention it, and I mention it all the time at presentations, we give our clients a choice to pay us how they want to, as long as they pay us. So as far as the client's concerned, and it varies from country to country. I know the standard, the norm in our profession is to charge by source word. In some countries, it's the target word. In some countries, like Germany, for example, charging by the line is quite normal because German words can be half a meter long and it still counts as one word, and Dutch equally so. By the character, I've even heard of charge by the character, offer a discount for spaces. And I don't know if you know Eric Hansen, the Swedish translator who started that Facebook group, Things Translators Never Say, put on something very appropriate today. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, because Eric is a bit of a joker. He said he'd received a message from a client. Yep, translation was fine. Can you remove all the spaces, please, and make it cheaper? And his response was, no problem. I will give you a second version with all the words removed and just the spaces, and you can work it out for yourself. In our case, we don't surcharge for difficult, for urgent or urgent deadlines and no minimum charge. We might be stupid, but it works. We do say to our clients that if it's an urgent deadline and if you demand it's an urgent deadline, we cannot always get it proofread or revised by a second person. That's your risk. And generally speaking, the client says, take your time. We don't do that. I know in the standard practice of the industry, you say, it's this price, and there's a 30% surcharge or whatever for urgent. Or if you want us to work in the weekend, it'll cost you double. We don't insist that our translators work in the weekend, but actually I know a lot of them choose to. For one reason or another, we don't pay them anymore, but we don't ask them, we don't expect them to do it. Equally, we don't charge our clients anymore. And it's not abused. We find that clients only ask for an urgent translation if it genuinely is urgent. By that, I mean it's something like sending out a message announcing the cancellation of an event because the person has died. That's genuine. If it's been on someone's desk for 3 weeks, forgotten about, and then described as urgent, that's not genuine. And just occasionally you get that, and they forget to take the date. You know, when you check a Microsoft Word document, it tells you the date it was last edited. And if that's 2 weeks ago, you know that it wasn't really an urgent translation. Something we do, we charge the same for all languages. Lots of discussion, lots of people saying that you shouldn't do that because how can you do that? Some countries are more expensive to live in than other countries, but to me that's not relevant. We expect the same quality from all people, and just because it's more expensive if you live in Finland than if you live in Bangladesh, to me that's no reason to say we'll pay you judged by where you live and not by what you do. And the classic example I gave on Tuesday was that our Dutch to Swedish translator lives in the Czech Republic. He'd be quite happy to accept Swedish rates because they're a lot more generous than Czech rates, and Dutch rates are somewhere in between. Same rate for all languages. I'm not suggesting that any of you who are LSPs, I'm not saying that's what you should do. I'm just saying that's what we do. Maximum price guarantee. If it's cheaper, if it works out cheaper, they pay the lower price. If it works out more expensive, we've made a mistake in estimating the price. Because as I said at the beginning, our clients can choose an hourly rate. And in fact, our translators all work for an hourly rate. We do not pay by the word, line, character, or space. We pay by the hour. Strange for translators at first. They get slightly worried about it. What happens if I'm too slow? Speed up. In actual fact, in reality, we say to our translators more often, we think you rushed that, take more time. We hardly ever say to them, you were too long, please be quicker. And that's interesting because we think sometimes translators, because they have to put the time that they work, they have to declare their time once they've finished a job in our system, and we pay them on that time. Sometimes I'm convinced they claim less time than it actually took them because they think we will get to like them and they will become higher up in the list. It doesn't work like that. Simply because most of the work we do it in several languages, 4, 5, 6 languages, the same text. The record's about 16 languages for one text. We can see if there's a big difference. If it takes 2 hours in one language and somebody else claims 30 minutes for theirs, you think, that can't be right. There will always be a slight difference, but never more than, we allow 10% margin of difference. It's rarely more than 5%. And like with most companies, we have our own online system, which means they can access it day and night, which is useful if you're working with people in different time zones. Might sound obvious, but we have terms and conditions that we require our clients to accept. Sometimes they say, no, we have to accept their terms and conditions. No, not in my case. We are selling to you. We are selling under these terms and conditions. If you book a flight on a budget airline and you tick that little box, you've accepted their conditions. You don't say to the airline, I will only buy my ticket with you if you accept my terms and conditions. It sounds stupid, but same policy, same concept. To our translators, okay, I'm going to speed up now. All translators are paid the same rate, I said that. We pay them quickly. We see no point in waiting. Why keep them waiting for their money? If we haven't got that money, we're doing something wrong. If we can't afford to pay people until we get paid, it means we're not managing our business correctly. And we even, in fact, pay some of them in advance. Small language, well, languages used less often, like Urdu or Icelandic. We do that once or twice a year. We don't want to be paying out small amounts under 20, 30 euros just for a small job. Equally, it's not fair to keep the translators waiting until they've earned a decent amount of money. In some cases, we offer them advance payment, and work they do, we deduct that from what we've already paid them. Do they abuse that? Never. As far as I'm concerned, not as far as now, nobody has ever taken the money and run. You know, said, thanks for the 100 euros, see you. And again, if they say no, we respect that. The word repercussions, if you're not familiar with that, means getting them back for something, a consequence of saying no. If I say no, they will never speak to me again. That's what I mean. We don't do that. If a client declines for whatever reason, that's their choice. And there are many perfectly good reasons for saying, sorry, I can't do that. It could be I'm on holiday. It could be I've just had a baby. It could be I'm on holiday and I've just had a baby. It could be lots of reasons, but if they say no, they say no. And we offer our workflow system that we use. We offer it to other translators free of charge. If they want to work in small groups of translators with other people, we give them a version of our workflow system free of charge. And finally, we have a working agreement. A working agreement is not a non-disclosure arrangement. It's not a contract. It hasn't got to be signed. It's a confirmation, if you like, of what they can expect from us and what we expect from them. And by starting to work with us, initially, they have to agree to honour the working agreement, and we also honour our agreement to them. It's basically common sense things, but having it on paper, like terms and conditions, is not something everyone does. It sounds crazy. Lots of freelance translators have no terms and conditions. They have nothing in writing at all. Even if you never use it, it's good to have it, because you never know when you might need it. And of course, fair to ourselves, because we're not a charity. I mean, we do exist to make money. In the case of my company, we have over 100 translators, and there are 3 of us who run the whole business. 2 of them are sitting in the office at this very moment, because we're an hour ahead here in Ukraine, and one of them is driving around Europe, having a great time, going to really wonderful conferences, and pretending that it's work. And enjoying the fact that it's work. So it's run by 3 people. We could have more, but we don't. Even with 100 translators and I don't know how many clients and work coming in all the time, we can manage that with the 3 of us. And we're all responsible for making decisions. We're all linguists, the exception being the IT guy who we hire in, and the accountant who we hire in. They're obviously not linguists and don't need to be. Our accountant says, Nigel, you're great with words, I'm great with money. I say, that's perfect, because the other way around would not work. I'm not very good. I think I'm good with money. I'm not very good at organising money. And we do quite well. We actually make it work under those conditions. And then excess profit depends on what you describe as excess. If you want to drive a Rolls-Royce to work every day, fine. I would call that excess profit. Being in the Netherlands, of course, we go to work on our bicycles, so that doesn't apply. Excess profit means, to my mind, earning more than you really deserve for doing that job. And of course, positive feedback is just great, and we like that. We don't ask for it. If we get it, we pass it on. We support lots of charities. We support good causes, if you like. So not everyone pays the same price. We've done some work, disaster relief agencies. We've done stuff for them. As I said on Tuesday, we used to say, We used to say we do it for free. We don't do that anymore. We now give them a 100% discount. And the difference being, something that is free, it's no real commitment. I can give you something, and if it doesn't work, I say, I'm sorry, it was free. What do you expect? 100% discount means you're still a client, you still have the same guarantee, and you can expect the same quality and the same service for what we provide. In money terms, it means exactly the same thing. It means there is no charge. But the way you describe that, because I did get told off once at a conference a couple of years ago, well, reprimanded by the chairman of ATA, who just happened to be sitting on my presentation, saying, well, if you do things for free, then you're making people greedy and expecting all translators to do something for free. Well, that's not the case. Not everyone shares my view. Not everyone shares the same idea about the translation business, profession, industry, whatever you like to call it. This is, unfortunately, the impression a lot of people get of our profession. That's the bad guy, and that's the poor guy who's being taken advantage of. I can't advise LSPs, I can't advise agencies, companies, or outsourcers, but I can request something. And that is, forget that, get rid of that, and replace it with that, by which I don't mean physical hugging or anything like that going on in the office. What I mean is just be nice to people. And I repeat what I said earlier on. It was so good this morning to hear the word respect being used to describe our profession, because that's not always a word you hear. So my advice to agencies is this. Don't ask translators to do things you wouldn't or couldn't do yourself. It does happen. We can't do it. Let's find some idiot who can. Don't blame them for the mistakes you made. Don't promise things that you're not able to deliver. Tell your translators if they do a good job, because you always tell them if they don't do a good job. Sometimes you forget to give them the compliment and the pat on the back that they want and that they deserve. And don't keep them waiting for their money. It might sound like common sense, but in all the meetings I have, not meetings, things like this, when I speak to other translators, these are the 5 biggest complaints that I hear from translators about the agencies or the outsourcers that they work for. Time and time again, this is what you hear annoys them, upsets them, worries them, because they feel they are being taken advantage of. So, a few tips for LSPs not to get on the blacklist, and there are blacklists, and not everyone realizes it. They're not official ones, but they're out there in the cloud, lists of agencies who have ripped off other translators and probably clients as well. I checked, I'm not on it. I would suggest we do not ask translators to pay to do unpaid translations. And again, I heard this afternoon, that the Oracle that Claire works for, or worked for, they don't do that because they haven't got time. I understand from other translators, from new translators approaching us, they say, I'll do a test translation for free, of course. We say, no, you won't. Because I know some bottom feeder agencies, the ones down there, will get a job, split it into 10 different parts, send each part out as a test translation for free, compile it into one document, sell it to the client at a huge price, and they've made 100% profit. Now, test translations, of course, we need them. A new translator has to be checked up for quality and suitability. If we ask for a test translation, we pay. We pay that person. It's a bit like training somebody in other industries. You can't have them working for you unless they have proved themselves. If someone says, I'm a pilot, you don't say, okay, jump in that 747 and fly it to somewhere else. No, You have to train them, and you have to check them, and you have to make sure they're right for the job. And that costs money. It costs us money for test translations, but we can absorb that easily. We'll pay you when they pay us. How often have I heard translators complain about that? It means an agency is running on such a tight budget that every day, that's my timer, every day they have to see, is there any money left in the piggy bank before they can pay their translators? A terrible business practice, I think. And the old excuse, client didn't like your work, we won't pay you. Bad excuse. Going back to fair trade translation, those words that I highlighted before, those words, the words that I think describes our profession as much as it describes any other profession, I think that's what we should be using in our profession. Those are, to my mind, the things that make it work. And with a little bit of that, then we will find we get a little bit of this. Gorgeous, isn't it? That was it. Thank you very much indeed. There is 10 minutes left for any questions or to throw things at me or anything else that you wish to do.
Thank you very much, Nigel. And I really hope that all the LSPs in the world agree with you.
I would like to think so.
So do we have questions? We'll have some time for the questions now, and at the very end we have just a little bit of a surprise for you. So for now it's just question time. So, Jette?
Yeah, kind of 3 comments, I think. One was, I sometimes get the feeling that they do this trick with the tests, send too many translators, and then I don't do it. But normally I do, but I get this feeling. And then I don't. I feel something fishy. But also they cannot get away with it more than once, I think, because that's a terrible translation done by many, let's say 5 or 8, I don't know how many translators. It doesn't work because we use...
They can't get away with it. Well, they can get away with it many times because each time they use different people, right? Each time they use different translators for a test translation, and each time it's for a different client. And they rely upon the fact no one wants to come back to them. So this is, as I understand it, so that's their way of working. Now, would you do a test translation for free?
Yeah.
You are, I'll be polite, you are an experienced translator. I happen to know Jette is the same age as me, so I can say that. You would do a test translation for free?
I do that still, and I actually enjoy it. But it's max...
Do you offer it, or were you expected to do it?
No, never offer it.
No,
but if they ask me, I say yes, up to 300.
Up to 300 words, right? Okay. If we were to work together, yeah. If I said we'd like you to do a test translation for us, you can take some money for it, or you can do it for free. I think I know what you choose. Yeah.
That's right. Okay. But I actually like to do it because I feel then I have proven myself.
Perhaps we could open this out. Is there anybody here who's quite happy to do a free test translation for an agency? Or if you are an agency, are you happy to ask people to do that? I don't see one single hand. No one's going to give away their secrets, are they? No. Okay, fair enough.
Anyway, yeah, I like it because I feel then work. Okay, I feel that then I proven myself. They know that I can do it well, and all is fine. Everybody's happy.
I can't say that. I mean, I don't agree with the way with the concept. If you're happy with that, who am I to say you shouldn't do it? I'm just trying to say that I think it's not a good idea if agencies insist on that because it puts them onto the closer to the blacklist of saying these are people who are trying to get something for nothing. Yeah. These are people who are trying to take advantage of slightly less experienced translators than you and me, i.e. the 25-year-olds just coming out of university, who will do it if they're told that's the only way to get a job. I think of it as being linguistic prostitution, if I may use that term.
Different attitudes about several things, also with the price. But that's how I feel. Another
Another one? I'll give you
Yeah,
two
I had
two
three.
questions because there are other people waiting. Yeah.
I was actually surprised. You say that there are not many translation agencies that have in-house translators. That was new to me because not that I have made any research about it, but sometimes I get the answer. Well, our inside the translators.
In-house translators
In-house.
working for a translation
Yeah.
agency. Does anyone have any experience of that? Is that yeah? Can you, Jette? Can you pass over the microphone, please?
Yep, we have pretty many, and I should say we've started using freelance translators regularly for probably last 5 years or so.
And you still have in-house?
Yes,
You still have
we
in-house?
we used only in-house.
And are you an agency or an outsourcer?
And now both,
Both,
in-house and freelancers, yes, so both.
And it works?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not...
Quite well.
Again, it's something I was not aware of. I've not come across it before. If it works for you, that's fine.
Yes.
And
but
what happens though if you've got a...
We would continue using only in-house translators, but we have to grow, and we don't have that many in-house translators. We cannot afford. I mean, because...
What
there are not
happens
that
if you have
many-
a translator and no work for that translator? Do you work in multiple languages or in different aspects of the same language? Are you just a single language
Both.
provider?
We work in different aspects of different languages.
So you have let's say a Russian to Polish translator employed, for example, in-house, and
No,
suddenly
I understand what you mean.
there's no work
Yes.
in Polish. You can't say, okay, I know you do Polish, but can you just do that German text for us?
No,
You
no.
can't do that. So
Sure.
that person sits there, makes the coffee, cleans the office. What happens
no.
to that person?
We just arrange our process in such a way that we always have job for them.
Oh, then you're an expert. If you always have work for them, then you can teach me something. You should be up on the
You're
stage
welcome.
telling me. Yes,
I'm sitting
okay.
here. Come.
Excellent.
Any more questions, anyone?
Hello. Hi, Nigel. My name is Luciano. I run a small translation business in Tallinn, Estonia. I'd like to go back to the matter of misconceptions. I've come up with 2 statements, and I'd like to hear your opinion, your input on those 2 statements. And the first one is, in general, all good translators are expensive, meaning that they charge fair prices, not over-the-top prices. And the second one is, all expensive translators are always good.
2 more misconceptions. Right. Could you repeat those, please?
Okay, the first one.
Before I put my foot in my mouth. Okay. The first one was...
The first one, in general, good translators are expensive, meaning that they charge fair prices.
Interesting. I suppose if you are successful, as well as being good, you can then say, hey, I'm good, but it's going to cost you. And it's up to that person to say yes or no. I think it's not a generalization that all good translators are expensive. And it's not a generalization that all bad translators are cheap. Yeah, it's a possible one. And the second one was?
And the second one is, all expensive translators are good.
All expensive. Depends why they're expensive. I mean, if they're expensive because they can command higher rates, they can only do that if they are good. You can only say, I'm expensive because I can provide what you want. But you have to have a track record, I would suggest. You have to show that you're good before you can show that you're expensive. You have to offer something that nobody else can do, or you can do it in a different or a better way. Again, I know you're just challenging me with these. They are generalizations, and I think it works both ways. I think the relationship between quality and price is one that can be interpreted in so many different ways. But if your experience is different from mine, then I respect that. Respect that word again. I respect that.
Thank you.
Is there anything else someone wanted to ask Nigel? One more?
It's your last one yet. You've had 2 already.
Yeah, but there's nobody else. Is there anybody else who want to ask?
No,
please.
but the bar has just opened, so
Okay.
they're sitting politely waiting for you to finish, right? Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I was also surprised when you said you were looking at the time that the translation was sent in. In fact, I have worried about that sometimes because I happen to be a night owl, and it's not uncommon for me to finish a translation at 1 or 2 o'clock.
No problem.
And
No problem.
and sometimes I have thought, well, do they check what hour it was turned in? Because of course they'll get it 9 o'clock in the morning, but do they check the time? And
No.
would that be a problem?
We don't check, but we see. I mean, to me, it's totally irrelevant. Some people are good night people. Some people are good early morning people. Don't ask me to do anything before 10 o'clock in the morning. All right? When I used to teach, the kids in my class knew to ignore me until about 10 o'clock. If they came near me, it was at their own risk. After 10 o'clock, I'm fine, I'm yours. Some people are great at 7 o'clock in the morning, their mind is fresh and ready to go. That's not me. Other people are night owls, they can work through the night. It's not important because you are freelancers, you're working under your own conditions. The only thing that's important is you don't hand in a rubbish translation because you were too tired to finish it properly at 3 o'clock in the morning. That was the only comment about time. It makes no difference to me what time you do it.
Any more questions? Then I'll ask just a tiny question for everyone. Being a freelancer myself, I was going to ask everyone, you saw this point about when a client comes to you with a translation in an area that is not your specialty. So the options would be to just say, thank you for your honesty, that when you refuse to do it, thank you, we'll come up with another opportunity, or just say, do it anyway. The client maybe won't even notice that. In your experience, I see there are lots of translators here. In your experience, is there any other option in addition to that? Václav?
Of course, there is. I often suggest that you may ask this, and this person. They can do it for you. So that's the client always needs an option.
You mean the client can ask that, or the translator can ask?
I, as a translator, say that I can't do any medicine because I'm afraid of it.
But I know someone who can.
But I know 3 people who can do it.
Perfect, perfect reason. And that's exactly what happened to me. That's how I grew from being me to having 2 hats, because I said exactly that. I can't do it. I know someone who can. Great answer. Yeah.
From the point of view of the LSPs, can there be any other option here? Is there someone to answer this question here?
No LSPs here? Not one single?
No, we see one.
Oh, they keep... Okay.
The one with in-house translators.
Yeah. Indeed, yes.
I was just going to say that there is sort of a creative option for an LSP in this case, to just say that if it's possible at all, if it's technically possible, they can say that, okay, we know that this is not your specialty area, and we will let our client know that this is not your specialty area, but we see potential, and if you want, you can take some time and get into this area, and gradually, because we see lots of volume and it's an important client and we know that you can do it, then maybe gradually you can learn and this might become your specialty area. And in some cases it really works.
And honesty usually does work, I
Yeah,
find.
if it's not something like, you know, biochemistry or something.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I can bullshit like anybody else, but when it comes to my profession, I think be honest and do exactly that.
Yeah, honesty is the best policy. Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, everyone. And just one more minute for a small surprise that we had. So in the first part of the conference, Nigel happened to win a prize that unfortunately he cannot use due to some language limitations.
And it's the first thing I've ever won in my life, and I can't use it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's his decision to hand it over to one of you. And the person who will get this prize from Nigel is going to be the first one to answer a very simple question related to the presentation that you just heard. So I'm going to ask you a question, and the first one to answer will get this prize from Nigel. And the question is, what year did Nigel start as an agency? 2004. Is that correct?
Just go and check. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yes.
Okay, so that means that this certificate goes to Alexander, and so it's
Shall I
up to you.
Explain what it is, because
Yeah, you just hand it over to
yeah,
him, and I'll explain what it is. This
it's-
is the certificate for the free access to all the video materials from the Belarusian Translation Forum that's going to take place in September. So this is now
and
yours.
it's absolutely useless for me because it's in Russian and I can't.
Yeah, it's going to
understand
be all in Russian, but we translators, we know what to do with that.
And I agreed with Yulia, the person who presented it on Wednesday. She said, "Look, give it to somebody who can use it." I said, "I will do so, and I will let her know because she has to change the name." It gives me great pleasure to give you this certificate. Don't know what it says, but please enjoy it. Okay.
Okay, thank you once again, Nigel. And have a nice evening, everyone. See you tomorrow.
Little piece of Holland here, some mince and some cookies if you want them. Okay.